Hey you guys, and welcome back to yet another ceiling fan discussion. Today, I'm going to be talking about a lot of the most common ceiling fan misconceptions that don't have a lot of truth to them, that are false. There's a couple of them that have partially trueness to them, but anyways, let's just get right into it. One of the first things that I hear the most is turn the fan off when you leave the room. Well, I'll just say this, definitely it might save on energy in some ways, but from what I hear in my house, if the ceiling fans are turned off when they leave the room, when they go back in the room is uncomfortable, it's stuffy. Ceiling fans don't just make you feel cooler, they help circulate air around the room. They do much more. So but for all those people saying, turn the fan off when you leave the room, if you want the air to be circulated and not to be as stuffy, leaving the fan on occasion might be a good thing to do. I don't leave my fan on 24/7. I do sometimes shut it off when I'm not in there, but there's definitely some times where I do leave it on just to make sure that the air can still circulate. It definitely does help with that. And especially if you've got a lot of condensation or other buildup on the windows, it can help to run your fans. For example, here in the winter, there's a lot of condensation stuff that does build up on the windows, so running the fans does help with that. So to say to always turn them off when you leave the room is just false. There are some situations where it is definitely beneficial to not do that. So one of the next things I want to talk about is that the faster the fan is, the more air it moves. In some cases, this one is true as well. However, typically that's not always the case. You see, some ceiling fans will work off of speed, whereas other fans will work off of pitch. And basically, blade pitch is, well, it's like how much of an angle it's at. The more of an angle the blade is at, the more air it's going to scoop and push down. But that'll also typically slow the fan down. Like for this ceiling fan here behind me, this is a smaller fan, so the blades are at a higher degree of pitch to help slow it down. But at the same time, this fan also moves tons and tons of air. And also on high speed though, you'll notice when I take this thing up to high, it still absolutely flies. Like this fan is ridiculous. It looks like I need to tighten the blades up on this stupid thing again. Anyways, yeah, the point I'm trying to make is that fans don't always, faster doesn't necessarily always mean more air. In this case, though, Casablanca found a really good balance. However, in some cases, the faster the fan, like a lot of those really cheap ceiling fans that you might get at some home centers, like I'm talking dirt cheap, like the really cheap ones. Maybe not the Hunters or some of those, because those typically have a little bit of blade pitch to them. I'm talking about the cheapest of the cheap. Those fans will fly and you typically will not feel anything. There are some fans where that is beneficial, like on most industrial type ceiling fans. Those ones typically do not have a lot of blade pitch. The way that those fans move the air is by having some contour to the blades. And I'm going to grab a blade here so you can see this is the blade off of an industrial fan. And you can see that the blade is contoured. And that is how industrial type fans actually move more air. It's because there's some contour to the blades that helps carry that air and push it out. So that's that one out of the way. Yet another misconception I hear about a whole lot is that more blades moves more air. That is absolutely false. Just no, absolutely not. That's one of the reasons why it's a kind of a decent thing that there aren't a whole lot of 6-blade fans on the market right now, even though I am seeing a few of them. But yeah, the more blades the fan has does not mean that it moves more air. For example, the fan behind me there, the Fanimation Wrap, that fan's only got 3 blades. And because there's less blades, there's more of a gap in between for air to be caught and pushed down. Whereas on a 5-blade fan or even a 6-blade, that gets cut down a lot. So while it's totally up to you on appearance, because obviously the blade count on a fan does definitely alter the appearance. If you're going for full-on performance, that's all you care about. 3 blades is probably your best bet. Once you get down to 2 blades, though, depending on how the fan is designed, you may not see as much. And once you get to 1 blade, once again, it's depending on how it's designed. I mean, 1 blades are probably not going to move as much air as 3 blades. I could be wrong. I haven't really experienced too many 1 blades, but yeah, overall, I would say that 3 blades is a really good spot to be at for airflow. 3 or 4 is pretty decent. Now, one of the reasons why they started adding more blades to fans from what I hear, is that the less blades that a fan has as well, the more choppy the airflow will get. Whereas on a 5-blade fan, you may not get that as much. So that's another reason why people might gravitate towards more blades. And that's why typically 3, 4, 5, and 6 blades are the ones that are most done, and you don't see a whole lot of 2 blades. Of course, there were some 2 blades back in the days of antiques, and then nowadays, once again, in more modern designs. But really, 3 to 6 blades is where you'll find most ceiling fans. And of course, fans with even more blades are more popular these days because they tend to give the fan a larger presence even if the fan is smaller. Good example of that would be the Modern Forms Renegade ceiling fan. It is an 8-blade fan, and it comes in a 52-inch size, but it tends to look larger because it's got more blades. But overall, though, the fact still stands that the less blades a fan has, the more air it will move. Now, typically, when it comes to ceiling fans that have 4 or 5-blade compatibility, or that can take more or less blades, typically what I've heard and noticed is that there is not an extreme amount of difference between the airflow. There's definitely some because of all the things I've already talked about previously. However, I don't think it's as great because I've seen a lot of people ask, oh, which configuration moves more air? And typically the owner of the fan will respond, it's about the same for each. And while of course we don't have full-on CFM testing rigs, and even if I had the opportunity to get a full CFM testing rig, I don't think I'd take it. I'm pretty sure that takes up like a lot of space. And if you don't know how they typically do that, one of the last things I remember hearing about when it comes to CFM testing is to put a fan in the room. You've got all these sensors around it that sort of helps gauge how much air the fan is moving. And CFM does stand for cubic feet of air per minute. Just basically says how much air the ceiling fan moves. And this one isn't necessarily as much of a misconception, this next thing I'm talking about, but more something that drives me nuts that I think people should do more. People see the ceiling fan and they're just like, oh, this one's pretty. I like this. Let's buy it. Yeah, let's bring it home. They get it installed. And I think one of the best examples of this is the Quorum windmill ceiling fan. Like, okay, here we go. Let's turn it on. What the hell? I don't feel any air. What's going on? It's because you're stupid. You did not read all the CFMs and all that stuff. When you're buying a ceiling fan, people shouldn't just be looking at how the fan looks. And that's why a lot of the showrooms I go to, at least, they don't just talk about the appearance, they talk about the performance of the fan, because that is also important. Some people want more airflow, and whether they don't communicate it or they're just doing everything on their own and they fail to look into all the info about the fan, they won't realize that some fans may not move as much air, and now they just bought a really expensive fan, like the Quorum windmill, and they realize it didn't move any air. The amount of reviews that I have seen on that fan that are bad because they claim that the fan doesn't move any air is ridiculous. All they would have to do is just scroll down, take a look at the CFM rating, and find, oh goodness, that fan only moves 2,000. And from what it seems like, a fan of that size should be more in the 6,000-7,000 range. I should probably get a different fan if I want airflow. You know, people don't always look at that. So it's very important if you're buying a fan. And like, if you're going for just appearance, you don't really care about the airflow, then you can more sort of ignore that. But not necessarily if you're very eco-conscious. Of course, you'll also want to take a look, because certain fans will obviously draw more than others when it comes to DC. And I think DC brings me to my last point of conversation I want to talk about here. And that is that DC motors are way, way more efficient. Now, here's the deal. They can be. Okay, here's the big thing. They can be. But I've talked to quite a few industry professionals, and what they have told me is that when you're starting up a DC ceiling fan, it might draw a little bit more current to get that fan going. However, once your ceiling fan has been running for quite a while, that's apparently where all the energy savings and the benefits come in, because apparently the magnets inside of the motor start bringing it around and keeping it at that steady speed, and less current is needed. And it's, for example, this fan behind me here, the Fanimation Wrap, that fan is a DC fan. It's on 24/7. And because of, first of all, DC does have some benefits, and the fact that I'm running it on the slowest speed all the time, it really hardly costs anything to run that. But if you're constantly turning the fan off, turning it on, or turning it off, on, all that over and over, that typically may not get you nearly as much of a benefit from the DC motor as you might expect. And I also heard them say, well, look at how most of the DC motors aren't even Energy Star rated. These days, I feel like more DC motors are actually starting to become Energy Star rated, but still, if you take a look, you'll notice not as many of them as you might think. I don't know, we'll have to see this year when all the new product catalogs start to come out. I'll have to really start taking a look at that. But yeah, those are some misconceptions that I hear when it comes to ceiling fans all the time. And some of these have more truth to them, some of them don't. It's like, really, there's some good and some bad about really everything I've talked about here, where there's definitely like some stuff you might want to follow and stuff you don't. It all really depends on what you're using the fan for, though. Like, at the end of the day, these are just some things that I hear and I know that I have some extra information about. But at the end of the day, it's more up to you guys watching, whether you want to listen or take this information and think or be more conscious when you're looking at buying new fans or what. That's all up to you. But anyways, I hope you did enjoy this, and hopefully you might have learned something. Thanks for watching. Goodbye.